It's the start of fall camp, and we're a month away from the first KU football game of the season. Let's break down some of the biggest position battles and storylines.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
How's it going? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks, and on today's edition of the show, we're going to be breaking down some of the latest news. We'll get into some of the biggest position battles for KU football as they start up fall camp today, and we are going to get to some of the biggest questions for fall camp with us being 1 month away from the first game between Kansas and LIU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So what are the biggest questions now that fall camp has gotten going, now that we are a month away from the start of the season for KU football? I think this is kind of the big first one, and this will obviously carry over to our position battle conversation too, but who's going to be the quarterback, and will whoever that ends up being, will it impact how KU runs the offense? You know, if it ends up being Cole Ballard, we've seen him run the football a good amount, but it's probably a different type of running game with Cole Ballard than it is with Isaiah Marshall. Marshall is extremely quick, extremely fast. Maybe you can use him to the edge a little bit more than you would use Ballard, who's honestly more of like a between the tackles runner, the way that he can run, very hard-nosed and be a physical runner, but still have a good amount of speed. I'm sure there's going to be some carryover regardless of who it ends up being, but, whether it's Chase Jenkins or Marshall or Ballard. And again, it feels like it's probably going to be one of Ballard or Marshall, even though I am a big Jenkins guy. How is that going to impact things? And then also, like, how are their skill sets different in the passing game? Like, is there a specific route? Is there a specific area of the field that one is better than the other? Like, is one, maybe good in the intermediate but struggles on deep balls? Or is one, more inconsistent throwing, I don't know, whatever, like a slant route or an out route or something where you have to tailor the offense to that? And how does that look for KU this season based on who that ends up being? The next question here is, and this probably goes in line with that, maybe a little bit, but is Kansas going to use more receiver or tight end heavy lineups or running back heavy lineups this year, right? When you look at it, basically the easiest way to kind of diagnose this is you have 5 offensive linemen and a quarterback, right? 11 guys are on the field for the offense. That means you have a combination of 5 between running backs, tight ends, and receivers. And how is KU going to morph that, right? Are you going to see a lot of 3 receiver sets where you have 1 tight end and 1 running back? That feels a little less likely to me. One, because KU has, it feels like very clear-cut top 2 receivers. When you look at Cam Pickett and Nick McMillan, that maybe you see more 2 receiver lineups, and then that allows you for 1 running back and 2 tight ends, or 2 running backs and 1 tight end in those different scenarios. But I also think when you look into KU leaning into being a more run-first identity, which again goes back to the first part with the quarterback, it does kind of get enhanced the idea of playing heavier personnel, playing more 2 tight end lineups, playing even some 3 tight end lineups. Are you going to see a lot of formations where you only see 1 receiver out there for KU, and you do see, 2 tight ends and 2 running backs, or 3 tight ends, even a 6th offensive lineman at times with the Andy Kotelnicki offense. It's less of a matter of will we see it. We will see heavy lineups here and there. It's more of a matter of how often will we see it. Will we see it more often than we saw in the first iteration of the Andy Kotelnicki offense, where, like I said, we still saw it, but maybe it goes even further this go around and you lean even more into the running game than you did that first go around. That'll be very interesting to me. And then that becomes very interesting because it makes position battles more interesting, right? If you're going to play more tight end sets, then the battle for even the 3rd tight end becomes almost more important and more interesting than who's the 5th receiver, than who's the 6th receiver, if that kind of makes sense for KU. The next question I have is, from the defensive side of the football or storyline here, how are we going to see the defense work out, formationally? I do think we have an idea of what the both offense and defense are going to look like in terms of, we saw the offense with the Andy Kotelnicki, era, if you want to call it that, from 2021 to 2023. And we know what he's done historically, whether it was at Buffalo or Penn State, to have a general idea, even though if we don't know the exact tweaks they're going to use or, what type of heavy usage of play calls they're going to use. We don't necessarily have those questions, but we have a general idea of what it, for the most part, will look like. And I think in general, we have a at least vague answer to what it could look like based on what we saw last year with DK McDonald. But we don't have a for sure answer, right? What if KU does settle into being more of a base team with 3 down linemen? What if KU does settle into being more of a team with, 3 linebackers out there as opposed to going back to the 2 linebackers? Like, we don't know that for sure. I do expect it to be mostly 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 safeties, 2 corners. But we're going to see a mix and kind of a flex between different defenses regardless, whether it's 3 down linemen or when they throw out like the 3 defensive tackles, then they basically have 2 defensive ends and it's almost like a 5-man front for KU. Like, they're going to throw different things out there, and I would imagine we're going to see all of those. But once again, what becomes the most prevailing defense and what is the backbone? What is the identity in general for KU? And again, that goes into the different player and position battles of if you're playing more 3 linebacker versus if you're playing more 3 safety, that kind of alters what you're seeing in terms of the position battles that matter for who's getting on the field. The next big storyline for me coming into fall camp is which players are going to show better than in the spring. And that can be in one of 2 different categories. That can be in the category of maybe they were hurt in spring football. Maybe they either got hurt or they were hurt going in and they didn't get a chance to showcase their talents at all. And now in fall camp, they're going to get to showcase their talents. So I think of like a guy like Jalen Dupree, who I loved his tape coming out of Colorado State. Feels like he's behind the 8 ball though now for Dylan Edwards and Yassine Willis. Can he make up that ground if he is healthy during camp? You look at just in general, if a player came over and it was their first time being around KU or in the system, and maybe it was a bit of a shell shock in the spring, and now you've had this time to get more comfortable, and maybe you haven't won your position battle yet, but now you get a second chance to do that. And, I always think of this from, I guess it wasn't last year, it was the year before. KU brought in Bryce Foster. Now, it was a little bit of a different situation because by the time KU added Foster, it was a little later in the summer when he transferred from Texas A&M because he had completed his track and field throwing season for the Aggies and then came over to Kansas. And earlier that offseason, back, ways back, they added a Division II transfer to come in and potentially play in the center position. Where Shane Baumgartner was the right name. But anyway, there was like early talk that, Foster was not winning the job or that it was pretty even between the two. And who knows how much of that was getting leaked out by coaches to try to lead to motivation versus actually being true or not. But I do find it interesting in terms of like sometimes it can take till the middle or end of fall camp for one of these new players to really establish themselves. And so I think that comes into play with a guy like Connor Stroh, for instance. Like, it feels like maybe Tavaki Tuigolovatu is winning that job. And I am a big Tavaki fan, so that wouldn't shock me. But, now that you have a little more time to get comfortable, could a guy like him or somebody else on the roster kind of, move back up and be more comfortable this go around as opposed to where they were in the spring? And then you're going to have some new players as part of this too, right? Like, that's another storyline here. How do the new freshmen who didn't join early get off on the right foot? Like, it's not Corey Amakri got off on the right foot for KU joining early. For the players that didn't join early and are joining now, sure, maybe getting off on the right foot doesn't lead to being on the 2 deep or being a starter or getting a ton of playing time as a true freshman. That is unlikely. It's just difficult to hit the field right away that way. But you can set yourself up for future success with how you hit the ground running right away. Because if you hit the ground running right away, then all of a sudden, like, maybe you can be the 3rd string in a position as a true freshman. And then all of a sudden, you're getting a lot more practice reps than the 4th string or the 5th string, for instance. Getting more opportunity or getting more, development time to where you're going to be set up, to kind of hit the ground running once you get to spring ball the following year. And then it just kind of continues on and carries momentum to kind of lean you forward and kind of get, intel on who's showing out and who maybe you do have questions about, right? And then kind of the last storyline here is, are there going to be any late additions? With basketball, you still have a couple weeks before the school year starts, and it's like, okay, well, you got that time. With football, it's not just like you have a couple months once the school year starts before the basketball season actually starts there. For football, this is fall camp, so anybody you add late is now late to the game. Now, if you are able to bring somebody back who was on the roster before, like a Justice Finkley with some of these new eligibility rules, well, the good news is he's been with the team. He knows the expectations. He knows the routine. He knows, the playbook and everything, that if he did have to join a week or two into camp, it at least would be a smoother run than somebody completely new joining the team. But, there are a couple positions you could point to, like receiver or defensive tackle, and be like, maybe even quarterback, and be like, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for KU to add another player if one falls in their lap as a newly available player who's scrambling to get to a school and isn't an overly expensive cost, but, can be a helpful addition for KU. How does that work? How do they, would they be somebody that wouldn't really make an impact till later in the season because they'd be joining so late? And, where do you see if they do make any of those additions in terms of maybe giving us a bit of an idea of, hey, we have a little bit of worry at this position. So some interesting storylines headed into fall camp. We're going to hear from plenty of coaches and players over the course of it, and hopefully get some good information that way. All right, what are the biggest position battles for KU football during fall camp now? We'll get to that next. Our episode today is brought to you by Kalshi. Before season even kicks off, everyone's making predictions like who wins the division, who makes the playoffs, who's lifting the trophy at the end of the year. Well, on Kalshi, America's #1 prediction market platform, you can trade those predictions in a live market. Can Kansas City win at least 10 games this season, right? The Chiefs are currently trading at yes for 10 plus wins with a 58% chance, which means if you trade $100, it pays out $173.23. So, over a $70 net there. And on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position, trade their draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. Download the Kalshi app, use code LOCKEDON to up to $500 in bonus credits when you trade $25. Kalshi, Kalshi, trade on anything, 18 and up only. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Kalshi products are available in all jurisdictions. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. One of the biggest position battles for KU football as we now embark on fall camp starting up today and being a month away now from the start of the KU football season. I mean, the first one is, and we mentioned earlier in the show, it's the quarterback position. Everybody wants to know who's going to be the starting quarterback. And I think we enter into fall camp feeling like Cole Ballard has a slight edge on Isaiah Marshall and that Chase Jenkins is too far back to make up ground after being injured in spring ball, which is unfortunate because for my money, watching the tape, Chase Jenkins was my favorite. So that is unfortunate there. But we don't really see Lance Leipold go with which I can appreciate in a lot of ways, but I can't help but wonder, do you make an exception for the rule for this? But point being, we see Lance Leipold very much go with the high floor, the consistency, the prove it to me over the potential. And the one that I always use as the example, because I think it's the best example you could possibly use, is that Hayden Hatcher started over Austin Booker, right? That's a pretty, I think Austin Booker turned out really, really good. He's off in the NFL doing good things. Hayden Hatcher was a nice story of I think former walk-on turned into at least productive rotation player for KU. That kind of shows it to me. And so that furthers the idea that I expect Cole Ballard to start. And I continue to say here that, I'm just going to be the Cole Ballard guy. I'll just take a stand. And when everybody's like, oh, I don't know, it's got to be, I'll just be like, he's going to do well. We'll go with that. But it is going to be very interesting who wins that job, obviously. I do think regardless, you're going to okay, maybe in a world where Isaiah Marshall wins the job, you don't see Cole Ballard come in a ton, but in the world where Cole Ballard wins the job, I think you'll see Isaiah Marshall come in a lot as a Wildcat quarterback. And because of the new 5-5, where there isn't really a red shirt here and everything, and where it's no longer a situation where, this is one of the cool things about the 5-5. Like, remember what happened with Khalil Herbert, where we got through the first 4 games of the season, and then he just decided not to go down with the team to Fort Worth against TCU because he was splitting time with Puka and he wanted to maintain his red shirt so he could transfer and still keep that year. Well, now because of the 5-5 and they're not being red shirts, if you get through the 4th game of the season, guess what? You've already lost your year whether you play it or not. So the beauty is, if you're using Isaiah Marshall in the Wildcat quarterback role type of thing, he can just do that all season and be like, well, I guess I might as well just roll with it, and then I'll transfer at the end of next year, to where you still can get, good value out of him in that way. But that will be a very interesting positional battle, one way or another. The backup tight end battle, I'm very intrigued by. I'm expecting Carson Brune to be the starter, but you've got 3, 5th-year plus seniors in that tight end room. Leighton Cure, who's a former transfer, been around the program a couple years now. You've also got a couple new transfers as 5th-year plus seniors with Carter Moses, the transfer from Albany, and Jalen Butler, the transfer from Old Dominion. And, Butler actually played a lot of like H-back, fullback, and tight end at Old Dominion, so maybe that makes him the guy for the Jared Casey role, but with, more athleticism and probably a little bit less blocking ability. But Carter Moses was used a lot in motion and maybe not as often as a fullback or a H-back, but he was used in some of that way at Albany as well, and going back and watching, one of his old games. And so I'm going to be very intrigued by who wins that job. I think that realistically, it's a 2-man race for 3 guys. Like, the guy who wins the backup role to Carson Brune is going to play a lot. KU is going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets. They're still going to play a fair amount, of 3 tight end sets. Once you get to the 4th tight end, you're now relying on an injury to kind of get into the game. So that's going to be a very interesting competition for who kind of wins out there. And then you look at the guard spot for KU, Connor Stroh versus Tavaki Tuikolavatu. I do think this is going to be a good position for KU. I think this is less of a position of battle that is a weakness. I think it's just like, I think both are going to be good players. Like, whoever it ends up being, I think is going to be a good player for KU. So that's a good one. I think it's just a good old-fashioned battle there. You look at the defensive side of the football. Blake Harold's going to be one of the starters, going to be one of your better players on the entire team. Well, who's starting next to him? It was supposed to be Trayvon McAlpine, the transfer in from Tulane, and he suffered a bad injury in spring. We don't really know what his status is going to be throughout this season. So who wins that other starting spot next to Harold? Is it Eamon Smalls, the transfer in from UAB, who had some really good disruption numbers when he was with the Blazers, but is making a jump up in competition? He's a huge body, huge dude. Is it Marcus Calvin, who we saw some good flashes from last season, and I think could take another step forward and be that guy? Could even a player like Jabril Conde, who's a bit of an unknown coming from D2, kind of a late bloomer, continue to bloom? Could it be Kevin Oatis, who maybe is as talented as anybody in the D tackle room, but he's a young player as a second-year player, a former like 4-star recruit who was at Arkansas? Could he just break out in the spring and earn that job? I think mostly it'd probably come down to Calvin or Smalls, but it's going to be very interesting for the situation there. And then, can you develop that depth? And then you look at the linebacker spot next to Lathan. Seems like Bam Crouch versus Quincy Davis is the big battle there. So that'll be very interesting, but it also comes down to, okay, is KU going to play more 3 linebacker or more 3 safety? And how much does it matter the performance of a guy like Jabril Alameen or one of these other linebackers for that specific role? And then kind of finishing up, like, the defensive back room for KU. I think there's a lot of opportunity up for grab. You look at the corner spot, Jalen Todd will be a starter, but it's like, is Austin Alexander going to keep starting, or is Roman Pearson going to come in and take him over? What about Jaleel Hurley? Saeed Gibbs played a lot of snaps for KU. Who's going to win that second corner spot, and who's going to be your third corner? Who's going to be the slot corner, right? Because some guys can fit into that archetype or that role or what you have to do a little bit better in the slot than they do in the outside. So how does that all work out for KU? Then you look at the safety position, and KU brought in a lot of solid players at the safety spot. And it feels like with some of the good reviews we've heard about Christian Pritchett so far, it really is 6 guys for 3 spots, assuming you're playing 3 safeties. You've got a couple returners, Taylor Davis and Mason Ellis. You've got Corey Gordon, who you figure to be a starter after he's been a 3-year Power 4 starter between Baylor and Louisville. I'm really high on Kajan Cummings-Coleman, who had an injury for Iowa State, but he at one point had earned starting opportunities, a redshirt freshman for an Iowa State secondary that has continued to produce NFL draft picks and high-ranking pass defenses nationally year in and year out. Um, you look at those guys, the aforementioned Pritchett, Jaden Harris, not to be forgotten in this discussion as well. Like, he can bring a level of athleticism and hitting. So, um, I think it's going to be a lot of playing time up for grabs in the secondary, and that's a good thing for KU because you need that unit to improve from where it was last year. But it's going to lead to a lot of interesting battles in fall camp for KU. All right, let's finish up with some of the latest news. A commitment from a former KU basketball target, as well as some other news. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by Game Time. There are more live events than ever worth seeing right now. I'm talking games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. Hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend, it's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are tuning to Game Time. It's the app built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy them, and exclusive savings opportunities that help you get to the events that you want without the hassle. I know the Royals haven't had the season we've all wanted, but it's still fun to go out during a summer game, enjoy a hot dog and a beverage, and watch some baseball, get outside, and you can get some cheap tickets. That's the beauty of the Royals not doing very good right now, right? But they're going to be hosting the Cubs, which is actually going to be fun. Cubs made some fun moves at the deadline. And if you go on Saturday, August 8th, they're doing a t-shirt giveaway. You can get tickets as low as $24. That's a 6:10 p.m. game this Saturday on the 8th. And I'm looking right now, you can even get some like really good tickets. Like, for instance, you can sit like behind home plate, I don't know, 7 rows up for like $318 if you really want to splurge. If you just want to kind of get into the stadium and get cheap tickets, you can get like $25, $30 tickets. You can find all those over at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use code LOCKED ON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKED ON, LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Thanks again for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. Quick mention: if you were purchasing the ad-free version of the show, that's going to be refunded. We have stopped doing that program, so we apologize if that's what you're looking for, and if you need to resubscribe to a specific feed or something like that. But thank you for the everydayers if you were a part of that. But yes, unfortunately, that is no more of a process. Okay, some of the latest news here: Malique Ewin is going to Oregon. So we did deep dives on Malique Ewin. We talked about him a little bit. He's the former Arkansas and Florida State big man who was in the transfer portal trying to get a 5th year of eligibility. Well, with some of these recent rulings, I guess, he technically is eligible for now until the NCAA appeals and if it goes through or not. But he's officially committed to where, if he does end up playing college basketball, we know where it'll be, and it won't be Kansas. The correct answer there is going to be Oregon, where he is now committed to play for the Ducks. So that one felt like the ship had kind of sailed on that for a few weeks here for Kansas, but that kind of officially shows that is the case. How about former KU football? I don't know, is it okay to say legend? Like, I mean, he ended up going to the NFL, being a starter for multiple years, including on a team that made the Super Bowl, started for KU since he was a freshman. Hakeem Adeniji, it sounds like he was placed on the retirement list in the NFL, so he might be retiring, in which case, awesome career. You go from a dude who was like a 3-star recruit out of high school to, again, starting right away for KU, to having a handful plus career in the NFL, to making millions of dollars across the way, and really cool to see what he was able to do there. And then the Big 12 team was announced, as was the All Big 12 predictions for women's soccer in the conference. KU was picked tied 3rd in the league, so once again, high expectations, as you would imagine, for Nate Lee here. And as part of the all-conference team, Caroline Castans and Jillian Gregorski were named to the All Big 12 team. Of course, Castans was a first-team All Big 12 honoree last season when she tied 3rd in the country with 15 assists. And so she's going into her senior season, but I don't know, is that her 4th year? Yeah, I think this will be her 4th year. So technically, you could still get another year out of her with the 5-5. And then when you look at Gregorski, she was a 2nd-team all-conference pick a season ago. She had 10 goals a year back, and she will be in her 3rd season this year. So could still have 2 more seasons, one more this one than the one after. So it should be another fun year for Nate Lee and company, and that season is approaching quicker than you know it, just a few weeks here. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Don't forget to check out some of our player deep dives, going into some more portal targets now that things have potentially opened back up, where we did Jackson Kohler on Sunday night. On Monday night, we did another big man, and we'll actually do a football deep dive on Wednesday as well. That'll do it for this episode of the show. See you next time on LOJ.